little clipboard slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly against the cold tile floor. Just moments ago, she had strolled into my ICU room, tanned and radiant from a week-long family vacation in Hawaii, loudly demanding my immediate discharge because my medical drama was inconsequential. But now, all the color had drained from her face. She stared at the nurse's front desk visitor log as if looking at a ghost. Her perfect, synthetic smile died completely. For 7 days, my parents and my golden sister had left me alone in a medically induced coma to protect their non-refundable vacation. But someone hadn't left my side. Right there, written in bold, familiar ink, was a single name repeated every single night. A name that unraveled a 32-year-old family secret they would have killed to keep buried. Before we open that log together, make sure to follow my story so I can see how far my voice has reached. My name is Camille, and at 32 years old, I finally learned what it feels like to break. For as long as I can remember, my existence was defined by a single, exhausting purpose: keeping our family's high-end logistics business running smoothly while my golden sister, Maya, reaped all the rewards. I was the one who arrived at the office before sunrise, staring at complex spreadsheets and managing frantic clients until my eyes burned from fatigue. Meanwhile, Maya lived a life of pure luxury, her social media filled with expensive shopping sprees and 5-star tropical vacations, all funded by the company's revenue. Our parents treated her like royalty and me like an invisible machine. The harder I pushed, the more they demanded. On the night everything collapsed, I had been working a grueling 36-hour shift to finalize a massive distribution contract that my parents insisted would secure Maya's future. My head was pounding, my chest felt hollow, and the text messages from my mother were relentless, ordering me not to leave until the paperwork was signed. I stood up from my desk to grab a glass of water, but the room suddenly spun violently. The overhead fluorescent lights blurred into a blinding streak of white, and a heavy, suffocating darkness rushed in to meet me. As my body hit the cold office floor, completely unconscious from sheer overwork, the last thing I heard was the distant, muffled ring of my phone, another urgent demand from a family that had already taken everything I had left to give. The steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor was the first thing that dragged me back to consciousness. When I slowly opened my eyes, the harsh, white glare of the ICU ceiling stung my vision, forcing me to blink back tears. My throat felt raw, completely parched, and a heavy plastic oxygen mask was strapped tightly across my face. I tried to move my arms, but they felt like lead, weighed down by fur lines and twisting tubes pumping fluids directly into my veins. The room was cold, sterile, and terrifyingly still. I naturally turned my head toward the bedside chair, expecting to see my mother or father holding my hand, their faces pale with parental worry. Instead, the chair was empty. The only person in the room was a kind-looking night nurse who was quietly adjusting my medication drip. When she noticed I was awake, her expression instantly softened with a deep, professional pity that sent a sudden chill straight through my chest. "Where is my family?" I croaked out, my voice barely a cracked whisper. The nurse hesitated, lowering her gaze as she gently patted my hand. She explained that an ambulance had brought me in after a security guard found me unconscious on the office floor. My parents had indeed shown up at the hospital initially, but the moment the attending physician assured them that my vitals were completely stabilized, their priorities shifted. Maya's highly anticipated, non-refundable celebration trip to Hawaii was scheduled to depart in just a few hours. Rather than staying behind to watch over me while I recovered in the intensive care unit, they packed their designer luggage, turned off their phones, and boarded the flight, completely abandoning me in the dark. The next 7 days crawled by in agonizing, heavy silence. While the rest of the world moved forward, I lay trapped in that sterile room, forced to confront the devastating reality of my ultimate abandonment. My phone remained completely dead on the bedside table, a cold piece of plastic devoid of a single text message or missed call from my parents or Maya. They were living it up in paradise, completely indifferent to whether I lived or died, just as long as my medical crisis didn't ruin their perfect family vacation pictures. The emotional weight of their betrayal felt far heavier than the physical exhaustion that had put me in the hospital bed in the first place. But as the long, lonely week progressed, the atmosphere in the room began to shift in a very strange way. During the quiet morning rounds, the night shift nurses began dropping peculiar, hesitant hints about my recovery. I was to have someone looking out for me so fiercely during the darkest hours of the night. When I questioned them, confused by their words, a senior nurse leaned in closer and lowered her voice. She revealed that every single night, precisely at midnight, a mysterious, well-dressed older man would arrive at the ICU doors. He didn't speak to anyone, but he would quietly sit by my bedside, holding a protective vigil over my unconscious body until the very first rays of dawn broke through the glass window, leaving right before the daytime staff arrived. On the 8th morning, the heavy silence of the ICU was shattered by the sharp, echoing click of designer heels. My mother strolled into the room, looking perfectly sun-kissed and radiant, with my golden sister, Maya, and my father trailing close behind her. They looked like they had just stepped off the pages of a luxury travel magazine, completely detached from the reality of the sterile hospital walls. There was no rush of relief in their eyes, no tears, and certainly no apologies for leaving me behind. Instead, my mother immediately threw her expensive leather handbag onto the counter and let out a dramatic, irritated sigh, treating my life-threatening medical emergency like a personal inconvenience. "Well, look who decided to finally join the living," she said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "Camille, you really caused a massive scene over absolutely nothing. We had to spend half our flight worrying about how this would look to our business clients." Maya stood beside her, scrolling mindlessly on her phone, completely indifferent to the tube still connected to my arms. When the attending physician entered the room to check my vitals, my mother didn't ask about my diagnosis or my recovery timeline. Instead, she stepped forward aggressively, cutting the doctor off and loudly demanding that he sign my immediate discharge papers. She complained about the rising costs of the private ICU room, insisting that my dramatic overwork tantrum had gone on long enough and that it was time for me to get back to managing the office spreadsheets. The sheer coldness of her words left me completely speechless, realizing that my family saw me only as a tool to be used, never as a daughter to be loved. The head nurse, a stern woman who had witnessed my family's complete indifference all morning, refused to be intimidated by my mother's aggressive demands. She stood her ground, calmly explaining that hospital policies strictly prohibited discharging a patient from the intensive care unit without verifying the official emergency contact records and signing the administrative logbook. My mother let out an exaggerated scoff, smashing the heavy metal clipboard from the nurse's hand with arrogant irritation, eager to finalize the paperwork and wash her hands of the entire situation. "This is an utter waste of our valuable time," my mother muttered, flipping through the official documents with practiced impatience. But as her eyes scanned down to the night-by-night visitor logs, her complaints abruptly ceased. The room fell into a sudden, suffocating stillness. All the vibrant, sun-kissed color drained from my mother's face, leaving her completely pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her hand began to shake so violently that the clipboard trembled against her manicured fingers. My father and Maya shifted uncomfortably, noticing her sudden, terrifying shift in demeanor. "What is it, honey?" my father asked, his brow furrowing with genuine confusion as he stepped closer to the desk. My mother couldn't even form words. Her eyes were locked entirely on a single name written in bold, elegant ink at the bottom of the registry. It was a name that was never supposed to appear in my life, let alone on an ICU visitor log. The synthetic smile she had worn since returning from Hawaii died completely, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic that signaled the end of their carefully constructed lies. The name written on that log belonged to Arthur Vance, a billionaire investor and the true powerhouse behind the logistics industry. For 32 years, my parents had told me he was a ruthless competitor who wanted to destroy our family. But as my mother panicked, the door opened, and Arthur himself walked into the room, surrounded by his legal team. The truth exploded into the open. I wasn't my parents' biological daughter. 32 years ago, Arthur's young wife had passed away during a complicated childbirth. Desperate and manipulated by a corrupt adoption agency, my adoptive parents had essentially purchased me, changing my identity to secure ongoing financial backing from Arthur's massive estate, pretending they were raising his lost child under a protective agreement. Arthur had spent decades searching for the truth, blocked by the legal non-disclosure walls my parents had built with his money. It wasn't until I fainted from overwork and was admitted to this specific hospital, which Arthur happened to own, that his automated security system flagged my DNA match. While my parents were sipping cocktails in Hawaii, my real father was sitting by my bedside, weeping for the lost years. He had uncovered everything, how they treated me like an unpaid servant while lavishing his money on Maya. My mother tried to scream that it was a lie, but Arthur's lawyer calmly stepped forward, handing her a federal freeze order on the company accounts. The 32-year secret was out, and the people who abandoned me were suddenly staring at total ruin. With the full backing of my real father, I legally severed all ties with the toxic family that had exploited my labor for decades. Within 3 months, the financial house of cards my adoptive parents had built completely collapsed, without my grueling 36-hour shifts to manage the operations, and with Arthur's massive funding permanently cut off, their logistics business filed for total bankruptcy. Today, I am building a brand new life filled with genuine love, respect, and the security I always deserved. Now, I'm incredibly curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if you found your name missing from your family's heart, but written in a secret history? I am leaving 2 other shocking stories on the final screen that will completely surprise you. Thank you for watching, and